taking it to thinking about the political strategy, thinking about the economic modelling, which don't dismiss that, just don't want us to start with an accounting approach. You have to be able to come up with a defensive policy in terms of thinking about the political question. 50 years ago, Ronald Henderson talked about guaranteed minimum income in Australia. It's coming up as an event this year, and there were 3 or 4 papers and political leaders that go along to that. And again, we'll be talking about universal basic income again. Even in some retired deputy prime ministers, and we're friends with Brian Howe, he's now talking about universal basic income again. So privately, politicians are going with it, but publicly they won't, except for former leaders. New Zealand are much better at campaigning than Australia. They've got enough on the website, just rather out of date. Don't go on to it bigger. I think it's still talking about the Swiss referendum. I'm not responsible for it because I'm not very QT anymore. Obviously that referendum happened, but so it's kind of embarrassing. Don't log on to the news.
Go to basicIncome.org.
Yeah. So anyway, the current campaigns are around kind of replacing pensions in New Zealand and thinking about it with children. So the kind of family tax bill is a universal kind of, more or less, that was taken away in New Zealand, and there's it's been studying as a already mentioned about some of these aspects. Tax reform, industrial relations, and social policy have got to go hand in hand. I mean, we spend as much subsidising 70% of home ownership in Australia as we do on public housing, community housing, and private assistance. But we do it through the tax system. It's what Richard Titmus talked about as the social division of welfare, right? It's all done through the tax system. We're not upfront about that in terms of the transfer system, which is a very small part of the welfare system. We do a lot through tax. That's why we think it's the future and a much broader conception than which Richard Titmus did. I think we need to learn from climate change, how the scientists kind of evidence-based the hell out of that thing, and they got a certain way. But as soon as some doubt was cast, that's all it took. Public attitudes changed recently. So I think there's a lot to learn about how to run that debate, learning from the climate change movement. And I think about you have to take some of this status stuff seriously. I mean, Ferguson talks about in Africa around the men, for example, who replaced what they do, which struggles for work with the EBI. Status is not something we're going to be doing. Right? So I think we have to take seriously what sorts of person, what sort of social needs we're constructing. The recognition is as important as Nancy Fraser says with the redistribution question. And we're not going to get to the redistribution while we still refer to Australian people unemployed and state elections and eating out of the soil. You know, nice beaches we have, right? But you have to do the recognition and the redistribution if you're going to get the change happening in terms of material resources. All right, potential for policy transfer. I think all the experiments that have been done today, Australia hasn't paid very much attention to. I think they're paying close attention to the Finnish case because it's a country with similar stats in terms of unemployment. It's a country in terms of a very developed economy, unlike India, unlike the examples in Africa. So I think it's one to watch. And Australia's paid a lot of attention to the education policy because Finland is much better to education than Australia is, and we spend much less. So I think there is some policy around that potential. And we possibly, yes, we'd like our own trial and so on, presumably inspired by the imagination of the policymakers. We talked about most of this. I mean, the last point's important, and again, it's going to discern this. If you want people to work in a gig economy, you're going to have to give them security, because that encourages them to take risks. I mean, there's nothing people are born with that makes them an entrepreneur, right? Again, it's nice to understand, right? It's about the padding that got in terms of being able to make something in terms of family wealth and so on. You need security in order to be able to take risks. And all the new forms of work that are coming online now, people don't have to be able to dip the toe in the water, not fearing that they can't pay the electricity or their rent and so on. That's really what a new world does. And that's why metaphors are important, but it's a floor, not a ceiling. And I think we need to keep those metaphors going. As Lakoff says, frames are no more than facts. In terms of cognitive scientists, the Democrats campaign, you have to think about how to frame everything. Because that's, you can go to a politician and advance the facts of their frame, and you're not getting anywhere. Because they'll just dismiss their opinions. So you have to think about it. All right, but never, this is an optimistic note, as Margaret Mead tells us, things have always happened with small. You don't need massive tipping points. It is about full committed people having these conversations in places like this that make the difference. And all sorts of groups out of the woodwork are getting interested. The RSA, the Royal Society, Association. They've got they hosted a recent conference. They're very strong in the UK, but I think they came out and supported in the UK as well. So there's a range of civil society groups that are interested in this, because the more you'll learn about it, more people tend to love it. It's one of those ideas, right? It's kind of reasoned. It's not the only idea, it's not going to see it, but it's one that's worth a shot.
So we'll take about 5 to 10 minutes for some questions. We actually got a ton of questions here for you. So the first one here is, I think we have this question, but we'd like to hear your take. How does UBI change a person's negotiating power with employers, with banks, financial institutions, government or politicians, and how does it include organized labor bargaining?
So I think in terms of changing its relationship, because 40% of the work that's done in Australia is very casual. In New Zealand, to use the more extreme example, they have 0 hour contracts. You sign a contract where they had no guarantee they'd give you any hours. They banned it in New Zealand. I think they're still in operation in the UK every sort of time. But what this would do is to say, well, we're going to sign a 0 hour contract. Right? I don't need to do that. I don't need to do it in the sense that I don't have to rely on that. They're not going to get the work out of it. It's not going to be better than what a UBI is. But the rate at which you pay UBI has to make a difference, which is why I'm not in favour of just replacing conditional welfare with conditional welfare at the wage state. So what you need to do in Australia is get a close to pension, which is what $18,000, not $12,000 benefits. So it should make employers create jobs that are more attractive. The optimistic in me would think that we should create greener jobs, not just dirty jobs and so on, and take the ecological argument more seriously. So employers would have to think more about conditions. At the moment they've got 81 people going and putting in full-time job. There's no incentive for them to do much of that. So I think, yes, it should do it, but it has to be part of the plan to make a difference.
And we have an interesting question here. Why are many people poor? Is it their own fault, or are they unlucky? Is it social institutions?
You're asking a sociologist that question. I mean, I'm always going to privilege structure, but I don't diminish that agency and responsibility has a role to play. But I'm certain with, Iris Marion Young talks about the socially connected model of justice. So we talk about homeless, but it only makes sense because the people who have. So we talk about people who are unemployed, there's a relationship with people who are employed. Just to speak categorically about the marginalised the victim of a circumstance ignores the relationship, ignores the system that maintains the way in which they're able to be poor, unemployed, not providing for themselves. But I don't dismiss the responsibility. I mean, what UBI does is really trust people in the sense of using an agency. It says, rather than us tell you what to do with the time that we've got, in terms of being low wage, low income, we trust that you're going to make some critical decisions. I've done lots of research on recruitment in terms of people and how they lenders. I mean, they are the best in terms of budgeting. We ensure that they've got no financial skills. It's just that they don't have money in terms of their budget. They can budget right down to the last 50 cents. They do have a fairly high level of financial history. They will take the high loan and pay a lender because they don't want to go to the bank or the bank refuses to give them their money. That's why they go to cash, pay their lending schemes, which is the fastest growing. Part of the financial risk that countries like Australia face.
So what would happen to the guaranteed income during a budget shortfall should the UBI be divided every budget cycle?
Yeah, I mean, Guy Standing would say, if he was standing here, his capacity to pay. So he starts small and then he can increase. I worry about the starting small because I think if you go backwards it's not enough to make a difference, and therefore I don't think that we're going to get enough support for amongst, in terms of seeing the results, it's not going to be transformative if it's too small. So I worry about that. Yes, it might have to be revisited each budget cycle, so I think if you bring the citizens along with you, like true austerity in the post-war period, people said, yeah, we know it's pretty tough, we've just been in the UK, for example, we're prepared to make sacrifice because we're now in a rebuilding phase, we're not going to expect a lot, but when the state gets back on its feet, when this country gets back on its feet, we want more share. You can still have a conversation and have good political leadership in the country with the community and citizens to say, we can't afford it this year as much as we would have liked in the past, but which, as soon as we can turn this around or whatever, then we'll go back to the rate which it was. I think if you bring people into the conversation about that, you're going to be much more effective than the sort of austerity we have. wasn't that there was enough money, it was just food.
Can you comment on the finding by the Stanford professor Walter Scheidel, the 4 ways to reduce inequality, war, revolution, state collapse, and deadly pandemics?
So I said that the kind of exogenous shocks, which particularly the wars and depressions, have really built the foundations for radical thinking in terms of the welfare state. What we would like to do, I think, is avoid those, right? We may have, that might not come, because if you think we do nothing, we're going to end up what the anthropologists call kind of social poverty. That's what's going to be. It's about competing for fewer resources. It won't just be jobs. It'll be air, water, land. Lands will continue just for a long time before many wars over. But it'll be around a whole lot of other resources that are not used to being scarce that are scarce. So I think, yes, we're likely to have those, but I'd rather we didn't. I'd rather that we actually have statecraft, proper statecraft, and thinking about how we plan. And as I said, proper adapting technologies and policies, not just mitigating against the welfare side. We kind of have what Ingolf calls irrational optimism. We think technology is going to save us. And it's done some great things in the past, and I love technology and not a lover in that sense at all, but it's not going to address the big social problems that are associated with what technology does. Because when you're talking entrepreneurs, Silicon Valley, software designers, they're not thinking about the social consequences of what they design. Right? That's up to politicians, that's up to communities, that's up to us.
I think we have a Trump supporter in the audience. They asked, do you think that UBI can effectively connect to people that will make a human great again?
Human great again. Well, I don't know. I mean, I think that partly what we're wanting to see is that we don't know. What we want to do is say that we don't need to spend, and this is why politics and time is so critical. Right? It's a sort of experiment we should have to see what we do with the time. In the way which John Maynard Keynes predicted we'd all only be working 50 hours a week, we've never gotten there because of the reasons that have been outlined today. If we did get there, it would be quite exciting, I think. It's not something I fear in terms of the connections we might have. We could possibly have many more social connections, a social capital that Robert Putnam so worried about. Might become virtual in the sense that people have the time to cook, get together, eat together, walk